Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. And I'm back for another episode of HR We Have a Problem. On this show, we really like to break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean. And we also talk about what you might do about them. So joining me today is Fermin Diez. Fermin is a C-suite leader, a top influencer in Asia and maybe a few other places, a board member, a speaker, an adjunct professor, consultant. Fermin does a little bit of everything. And he's somebody that I first met during my tenure at Mercer when he was leading the talent business in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. And he and I collaborated on HR data and systems at the time. So welcome, Fermin. It's great to reconnect with you.
Teri, I'm so happy to see you. Thank you for having me on the show.
That's awesome. One of the things I do like about this show is that I do reconnect with people smart people, thought leaders that I've known from the past who I really think can add value to our listeners. So great to have you. Your experience covers a lot of ground, from the soft skills to the more technical stuff like data and analytics. I've seen some stuff you've written about ChatGPT and other systems. One of the things I understand you like to talk about, though, is personal growth. And I know there's a lot of skills and abilities that you need for a career in HR, but there's also a lot of sort of general level of savvy and sophistication that's needed to add value in the HR space, that real soft stuff. So I thought we might get back to some basics for this conversation. Does that sound like a good plan to you?
Sounds amazing. Let's delve into this, because I think this is something that HR professionals really need to understand, that there's a need to mesh the soft and the hard skills in every HR professional. The soft skills are important because we are still going to be mindful of the fact that we're working with and for people, and that we need to get better at rapport, at empathy, at understanding. We need to have an awareness of things that may not always have readily obvious return on investment, like DEI, community involvement, and so forth. But at the same time, we work in companies, and companies have a mandate, and the mandate is usually about growth and profitability. So we also need to understand, how is it that the soft variables that we manage lead to hard numbers in results? The best HR people will always be the ones that can understand how to get return on investment and how to add value to companies. And so every HR professional needs to know both sides, the soft and the hard.
Yeah. I work with a friend that likes to tell a story about their time in HR and when and how they learned about how the business makes its money. And, this was a fabric store that basically what she learned was they were making their money at the checkout where they sell candy and other novelty purchases, not making much money at all on the real business. So that was a shock, right? And a pretty important thing for us as HR professionals to kind of understand is, how does my organization make money? Because that's really critical to how they provide value to the business units.
That's absolutely correct. One thing I always advise starting HR professionals is to learn two things that sometimes are not obvious in the curriculum or in the area of study, or even in how we talk about HR development. One of them is finance. The understanding of how the company makes money needs to be tracked through very standard accounting and finance principles. The way the business measures itself, we talk about balanced scorecards, but in reality, balanced scorecards are not balanced at all. They're very unbalanced, and they're very unbalanced towards financial results. So if we don't understand revenue and profitability, and like you say, Teri, how the company achieves revenue growth and profitability, it will be very hard for us to be credible as HR professionals. When we want to go talk to senior management about why we should implement this particular new training program, they won't believe us. I'll tell you a story, lots of stories over the years and things that I've done. But I once went to, when I was running an HR department for here in Asia for a semiconductor company. And it was sort of my first few months on the job. And I did my first trip to Japan to go look at our design center and our manufacturing facility in Sendai, Japan. And when they were briefing me on the first day, they were very proudly telling me about how they have put all 42 of the top leaders in the country through the company's, at the time, high potential or high profit, I think it was called the High Potential Leadership Program. And this is a leadership program that costs around $12,000 per head to put people through a 1-week leadership program. And they were very happy with it. And so I asked what I thought was an obvious question. Great, you just spent about $500,000 of the company's money. What did we get out of it? And they couldn't come up with a better answer than, well, they now have gone through the program and they speak the same language as the US counterparts. I said, well, no, not really. If we just spend $500,000, we should see results. And if all 42 of the senior leaders are now better leaders, we should see better output. Did we see any of it? They didn't even understand my question, which was difficult. So over the years, then I eventually got my team to understand that we couldn't just go around doing things like that, just to do training because that's what's on the KPI, that we really needed to do it in a way to improve. So in subsequent years, we had factories also in Malaysia and in China. We changed that paradigm. We started talking to the HR staff about how is it that you want to sell things, and we wanted to sell this new quality assurance program in Malaysia that was going to cost around $800,000 to deploy for about 1,000 of the factory workers. And in this case, I just made it very clear before we go in asking for nearly $1 million worth of money to put this training program, let's figure out what is it that is supposed to improve with this training. So we landed on yield. Yield is a manufacturing measurement of how much wasted raw material we get on the production side. Best in class is in Taiwan, around 98% yield. That is, they use 98% of the raw materials. We were at around 91%. I said, okay, can we make a promise that if we train everybody, we can get it closer to, say, halfway, 95%? Now, that meant around $3.5 million of savings. So it was an easy sell. When you go in and you say $800,000 investment, $3.5 million of savings, we didn't even promise that much. We just say, how about we improve by 1.5%? We get $1.5 million of savings, and you get 100% return on investment. The moment you can make your business cases that simple, but at the same that powerful, of course, not only we got the money to do it for everybody, we got the money to do it there and in China. We ended up saving the company more than $5 million. But we need to be able to speak that language. And HR folks, especially when they're starting out, they're a bit reluctant to sort of get their hands dirty with finance and accounting and understanding the business.
They don't like math.
Not usually. And they think it's not their job. They think their job is to make people happy. But I keep trying to tell them your job is to make people happy and shareholders happy, not just people.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges I see all the time in HR when they're trying to make the business case for whether it's getting new technology or implementing a training program or changing the way they go after talent. They struggle with the ROI, like what really are the key performance measurements, the things that we're going to deliver, and are they relevant for the business metrics and not just for the HR metrics, right? Because if the HR metrics, you can improve your HR metrics, but if they don't improve the business metrics, then they're not relevant.
I often make an analogy out here in Asia that resonates. You may or may not know that Chinese has many dialects. The main dialect is Mandarin, but there are other dialects. The most common one that people would know about is Cantonese, because that's the one they speak in Hong Kong. But there are others. There are Hokkien and East and whatnot. So I often say, and by the way, when they speak in dialect, somebody that speaks Cantonese only would not understand somebody that speaks Mandarin and vice versa. They're that different. And so I often make the analogy that the business world speaks only one language, and the language they speak is finance. That's the common language. But that in HR, we speak dialect, and the dialect we speak is HR language. And if we want to be understood, we have to learn to speak the main language of finance. I learned this lesson a long time ago when I was still a junior HR guy working in the oil refinery in the Venezuelan oil industry. I was in charge at the time of what was called organizational climate, which was sort of the org engagement survey that we used to run a pulse survey every month. And I remember going to see the head of procurement and we call it materials management. And I had a very nice report about his results and how he needed to improve communication and satisfaction and motivation. At the end of the day, the refinery was, of course, in a very remote site, and there was a single bar that everybody would go to after work. And so that day, I was sort of lamenting with the bartender that over a beer that I've had a rough day. And who walks in is this very head of materials management and sits next to me, orders a beer. And over the course of the next 2 beers, what he proceeded to tell me was, you come to talk to me about satisfaction and motivation and communication, but my boss only talks to me about dollars and cents. I will listen to you the day you can tell me what you want me to hear in dollars and cents. Don't ask me to do your job. That was his point, that satisfaction, motivation, communication, that's HR's job. Help me to do my job, which is to get my KPIs done in dollars and cents. And that was so powerful. It was so powerful to me that I went and got an MBA after that. About a year later, I went to literally go study business so that I could understand how to speak finance language. Now, I don't think everybody needs to go get MBAs to learn this, but they do need to make the effort to learn a bit of accounting, a bit of finance, and a bit of number crunching if they really want to be able to speak the business language. Yeah. If we want to be taken seriously, we want to be considered business partners and have a seat at the table, which is often what we hear. We need to speak the language that they speak. And
it's an interesting time for that too. I think one of the things that we uncovered in the HR system survey that we run annually over the last couple of years is the experience in HR, and particularly in HR technology, has been decreasing. We saw the percentage of people that really were experienced HR tech professionals with 10 plus years of experience drop dramatically. And last year, more than 50% of that same group had basically less than 3 years of experience in this area. So it's pretty dramatic when you think about it. I think COVID probably had a lot to do with that. A lot of people left HR and they probably left a lot of functions, but HR was probably particularly impacted by some of the challenges that happened over that time frame. But so people are really there's a lot of new people coming into this space, and I think that's a really good learning moment for people is how can I go and get some more basics from a finance perspective so that I can start speaking the right language to other people in the business.
One of the things I see, Teri, in line with what we just said, is that even the people that go and study HR, they go get HR degrees, either an undergraduate degree or a master's, the attitude tends to be still too much of, well, I'm not a numbers person. I got into HR because I'm not a numbers person. I'm a people person, as if these were opposites. They're not really opposite. You can be a people person and a numbers person. In fact, the point I make is that you need to be both a people person and a numbers person to be a successful HR person. Yeah. I don't know any one single top HR leader that is not also a numbers person. Eventually, you need to get to understand and be comfortable with numbers. The other thing that I see is that often then they'll say things like, oh, but numbers is the job of the HR analytics department, not my job. And that's the other thing I sort of don't understand. No, it's everybody's job. Everybody needs to be able to answer questions. If you're an HR business partner, you don't want to go to your business partner to say, oh, yeah, let me put it on the queue with the HR analytics department. And I'll get back to you in a few months' time once they have time to address your question. No, you want to be able to sit down, get some data, put it in an Excel spreadsheet, chuck up some numbers, put out some graphs, and tell a good story to your HRBP. And if it grows bigger than that, maybe you'll need more help. But I figure 80 to 85% of any question that we're ever going to get, everybody in HR should be able to answer with simple analytical tools, Excel, Power BI, and basic knowledge of, like I said, finance and statistics.
Yeah.
Should not be afraid of this. Every successful HR professional needs to do this.
I think people would be surprised at how much and how quickly they could build credibility within HR and within the business just by having some of those basics, right? And not just saying, hey, here's the turnover ratio, but here's what it's costing your department given the level of turnover that you have, right?
It's simple things. I'll tell you questions like, is it better to hire from agency or referrals? Very simple questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If you're an HRBP, one of the things that will happen often is you get a vacancy, your business partner comes in and say, hey, so-and-so quit. How quickly can we replace them? Do you know where to look? Or are you going to start from zero? Oh, yes, okay, let me put in the job requisition. Let me get your job description. Let me start it through the process. Okay, you're providing service, but not as useful a service as if you had already crunched a little bit of numbers and say, of the last 25 people that we've hired, it turns out that the 7 or 8 that we hired from agency A, they're still here and they're also doing quite good, but the ones that we hired through referrals actually haven't worked out. So let me call agency A directly, and as opposed to starting the process from the beginning. If you can do at least that much, or things like, is it better? Simple questions again. We tend to think of training as if training was the answer to employee engagement, but not really the answer to adding business value. But simple things like, is it better to train everybody, which would be the employee engagement answer, or is it better to only train the people who are not very good? Because in the end, the bang on the buck is going to be on train the lower performers to get them to perform better. Because if you train the higher performers, the likelihood that they're going to improve that much is going to be marginal, and maybe the cost is not there. These are very simple things. Now it involves maybe doing regressions or doing t-tests. And then a lot of people start freaking out. Oh my God, he's saying dirty words like t-test. But no, these are very simple things. Excel can do all of that. You don't have to know how to calculate any of it. You just have to know where in Excel it is so that you can take your sheet, put it together and draw it up and do a chart. It's not that hard. Most people can learn how to do this in a 2-day course.
Yeah. And I find that when I think this is, especially for people who think they're people persons, make friends. People in finance would love to help you figure out the numbers, right? If you've got the data that says, here's what's happening, they can help you figure out the numbers, right? The cost or whatever it is you're looking for. Your friends in analytics, right? Make friends with the people in analytics. Know what they're doing, what they're looking at. Ask questions. There's lots of ways to get at this. You don't have to be an expert, but you need to know where to go and who to talk to get the information.
Make friends also in places like sales and marketing. Figure out how the business actually happens.
Yeah.
Make manufacturing. Know how it's built. One of the things I've always done as a matter of practice, and I've always advised everyone in my HR teams to do, is to go spend time on the ground. Go on sales routes with salespeople. Just spend a week, if you can, with different types of salespeople. Figure out how the business actually works. How does the customer feel about our products? How does the customer feel about the competition? You will learn so much. No amount of training will ever replace this kind of thing. Go to the manufacturing site and spend time understanding. Every manufacturing site will have lots of charts and graphs that show this and that. Spend time understanding what they mean so that you get a better sense of what they're trying to achieve in terms of quality, in terms of production, and how it all works. The HR people that only spend time with other HR people tend to be very insular, and they only end up talking about engagement and retention rates as if they were the only reasons for HR's existence. The more you spend time understanding how the business ticks, how the business makes money, the better of an HR person you'll become. So there's no substitute for this.
Yeah. I tell people, spend some time in payroll. If you want to really see what's happening out in the field directly, spend some time in the payroll department. Spend some time as an HRBP. And I love your idea of don't wait for somebody to approve it, or don't wait until you can get somebody to agree that you should get this training, if you will. You would be surprised at how much the sales teams and other people would love to have you come out and spend some time with them.
In my years at Pepsi, for instance, I did Pepsi routes to sell Pepsi in supermarkets, sell Pepsi at mom and pop shops. I spent time at Pizza Hut stores chopping up tomatoes and putting cheese on pizzas. And I spent time at Taco Bell's at the cash register. I spent time on the Frito-Lay factory floors trying to figure out how potatoes are peeled. I did all kinds of things. But one of my happiest days in my HR career, I was doing a sales route in Manila in the Philippines with a Frito-Lay guy. And we ended up at lunch. Typically, of course, lunch would have to be at a Pepsi restaurant. And so we ended up at a KFC. And the supervisor met us at the KFC store. And he had a chat. I could see that he had a chat in Tagalog with the sales guy that I was with. They chatted for a few minutes. They pretended that it was just trying to get the menu of what they were going to order for lunch. But I could understand enough of what the gist of what they were saying, that they were actually talking about what was I doing and how well was he doing against what I was doing. I wasn't doing anything really. I was just trying to spend time understanding the Philippines market. When he sat down, he looked at me and said, "You're really not in HR, right? You're really a sales guy from headquarters pretending to be an HR person, right?" That was that I could actually make someone believe that even though I told them the absolute truth, I'm an HR person, that I could actually make them believe that wasn't true, that what was more true is that I was actually in sales. That meant that they thought I really understood the business and really knew what I was talking about. The amount of credibility I had with that team was amazing. And we ended up changing, for instance, our sales compensation plan, which is one of the key thoughts that I had after that trip, because I figured that they were not doing enough on the sales comp front. Great impact for the business. Again, they managed to take market share back from some local competitor that they had. And then HR can walk on water because we added value to the business. Then they love us. They say, "Come back. What else should we do?"
Yeah. Yeah. The importance of influence and just understanding of the business. I just think we totally underestimate that in the HR function. And especially when these larger organizations where there's so many, the roles are so specific to, hey, I just focus on benefits, and hey, I just do leave of absence, and I just do onboarding, right? I think it is one of the challenges of HR. And I think it's the challenge of the CHRO to help their organization figure out how they better work within the business, right? And I think I feel like that's a charge of leadership and the management team to make sure that their people and their teams get an opportunity to learn as much as they can and be part of the business where they can.
That's so true, Teri. And sometimes we miss the point that everything we do in HR is absolutely interconnected. And many HR folks don't see that because, like you say, okay, I only have a KPI about how many people I onboard or how quickly I get it done, as opposed to we have an overall KPI in HR that probably has to do with retention or engagement or even adding value. And onboarding is a piece of that cog, and we often miss that part. I see it also in things like ChatGPT. When I go around talking to HR audiences about ChatGPT, in general, what you get is a smattering of maybe 40 to 60% of people that say, yes, they have used it, but only for their personal use. So they use it now for maybe things like writing a better email. And what I find is the missed opportunity is that where really ChatGPT could be tremendously useful for HR departments is how to optimize complete processes like recruiting and onboarding. But because we don't talk to each other, because everybody's just using the tool in their own little way just to write their own little emails, we haven't yet figured out, well, what if? I find that it precludes us from getting better at what we do that we don't actually talk to each other, that we don't see what is the impact that training has on promotions, or what is the impact that onboarding has on retention 3 years later.
Yeah.
We don't do enough of that. And that's to our own detriment. Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree. I think AI, it's a scary term for a lot of people still, especially in HR, because I think they fear what might be around the corner if they use AI and it gets used improperly, or they use the information in the wrong way. But I think the reality is there's a lot of opportunity to use AI in this area to simplify and take away some of the mundane work that people do, so you can free up more time to spend in the business and really understanding the business and helping the business increase its value.
Talking about AI and how people find it scary, I attended a conference a month or so back, early December, and they had a section on Gen AI for the HR world, and there was a panel of speakers. I knew one of them who was a rather feisty speaker on many topics. And in the end, the overall tone of the other folks on the panel, as well as the moderator, was that, HR professionals should go into this warily and carefully and slowly. And I find this to be, at least in the context that we're here in Asia, scary in itself. It's not that AI is scary, it's the fact that HR is refusing to go along with it that's scary. I think AI, this boat has sailed. This isn't going to go away. And in fact, I think probably 2/3 of CEOs around the world, according to some data I saw recently, are convinced that AI is going to have a positive impact on their business. Now, what they mean by positive impact on their business is usually around, I can deliver more for less.
Yeah.
That sounds like HR. Can I deliver more for less? It turns out that the CEOs are already thinking about this, but HR is still thinking AI, we need to be careful. It will happen, and the change will need to be addressed. And we in HR need to know that even before we start thinking about our own HR department, we need to think of the fact that it's going to change the business, how we do customer service, how we do accounting, how we do many things in the organization. And we need to be already aware of the fact that is happening and that we need to be there.
Yeah.
Other thing that's happening that CEOs are thinking about, but that HR, I think, are refusing to accept yet, is that just as much as they think things like customer service can be automated through Gen AI tools, they're also thinking things like recruiting and onboarding and maybe even training can be automated. So just as much as they think we can cut maybe 70% or 90% of my customer service staff, they're also thinking, hey, and we can also cut 70% of our recruiting staff. And I think many HR folks actually are afraid that this may be true. And maybe the reason, or one of the reasons they fight the implementation of ChatGPT or other AI tools, is because they fear that their own jobs are going to be on the line.
Yeah.
These very HR folks that are people that we talked about are also concerned that, well, is ChatGPT not human enough? I haven't seen studies on HR, but I've seen studies on doctors. It turns out that ChatGPT scores higher on empathy, nearly 4 out of 5, than doctors do, which is only about 2.8 or 2.9 out of 5.
Interesting.
I've seen some chatbots created with GPT-4 on HR policy that have more empathy than comparable emails from the HR department. And they can answer within minutes, whereas usually emails from the HR department require 24 to 48 hours to get responses.
Yeah.
So lots of things that we need to be aware. You're right that we need to be aware of two main issues. One, when you use GPT, you need to make sure that it's within your firewall, that you're not putting out any confidential information. The second one is that if you don't know how to do it properly, it can hallucinate. So you still need to have quality control on it. But like I said, this ship has sailed. Yeah. To get on it quickly. Otherwise, somebody above us is going to be deciding for us to rethink our processes.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't wait. So I know you've kind of already said if there was something that you could tell people to do today, it would be learn some finance, understand the analytics. Is there anything else in terms of just sort of advice or guidance that you'd give somebody who's kind of new in this area, something they could do tomorrow, right? After listening to this show, something they could do that would start to make a difference for them personally, kind of move them in the right direction.
Something they can do tomorrow. Actually, yeah. I would say just go into any online course that you can find on 3 topics. And you can do that literally over the next 3 days, and you'll be a better HR professional afterwards. One is on the accounting and finance. You really don't need to take a whole course on accounting and be as good as the accountants. No, you just need to understand basic principles. Basic principles, particularly about revenue and profitability. It may sound simple, but the business talks about EBIT and EBITDA, for instance. Every accountant, and in fact, everybody around the table would know the difference between EBIT and EBITDA. Many HR people, when you ask them this question, what's EBIT and what's EBITDA, they can rattle it off. Oh, it's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Great. The real question is, do you know when to use what for an incentive system? Everybody around the business table would know that, and you don't. So here's one piece of homework. Just go find out different types of profit, from gross profit to EBIT, to EBITDA, to net profit, so that when they're talking about profits, you know which level of profits they're talking about, and you know then how to help the business. Revenue is a little bit simpler. There's only gross revenue and net revenue. It's not so difficult, but profit, yes. Just go and Google this. It will take you literally 15 minutes to understand profitability. That already will make you stronger. Second thing you need to understand is a little bit of analytics. Now, analytics may take, like I said, maybe a course that you can find on online. And what you need to learn on analytics is very basic principles of statistics. And those are correlations, ANOVAs, and t-tests. Okay? Don't think I just cursed at you. I didn't. These are very simple ideas. Again, go and Google what is a correlation, what is an R-squared, what is an ANOVA, what is a t-test. A t-test will help you compare a group before and after. In other words, before you train them and after you train them, did performance improve? That's the kind of thing exactly that we need to do. Or compare 2 groups. This group has gone through onboarding. This group hasn't gone through onboarding. Is there a difference in whatever?
Yeah.
Very simple things. And then the third thing is spend another maybe half an hour online. This is also free, on what is the analytics or the statistics tool pack in Excel. I won't even get you into Power BI or anything more complicated. Excel, which everybody already knows how to use. Go find out, what does the analysis tool pack do? Then add it to your Excel. Just add in the tool pack and start playing with it. Start doing t-tests and correlations and ANOVAs on Excel. You can do this over the next 3 days. By the end of the week, you will already be a better HR professional.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's great advice and simple, right? Anybody can do any one of those things. And I think we'll appreciate how, I think it'll be eye-opening, right? Just to be able to say, wow, I hadn't really thought about the numbers that way. So that's fantastic. Thanks, Fermin, for joining us today. This has been a great conversation. I hope some people walk away and actually do that. I'd love to hear from them. So thank you. I know people can find you online and on social. They can find you on LinkedIn.
Do connect. Do send me your questions. Do ask me anything. I'm happy to support you any way I can. Teri,
Awesome.
Thank you. It's been great reconnecting. It's been great having this conversation.
Thank you. I also want to thank our producers, Brand Method Media Group, our marketing team, and I want to thank you for tuning in. That is all the time we have for this week's episode of HR We Have a Problem. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you'd leave us a review, or we'd love to hear more about what other topics you'd like to hear about. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everyone.